You deliver a logical, well-researched argument, but the person across the table stares blankly at you, completely disengaged, or they start to become defensive. This friction rarely comes from the facts of the data. It's almost always a failure of the delivery channel you're using to transmit that data. This Venn diagram shows the gap. One circle represents the content you say, and the other represents how that specific person filters and processes reality. The tiny overlapping sliver in the middle is the only part they actually comprehend. To widen that sliver, we have to address the three primary sensory channels all humans use to filter reality: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Awareness of these filters isn't a modern invention. Ancient philosophers like Aristotle spent decades studying how our senses allow us to make meaning of the world. Solving cyclical miscommunication requires you to stop repeating your logic and start translating your message into the receiver's preferred sensory language. We all use all of our senses, but humans naturally default to one preferred sensory channel, especially when we are learning something new or operating under pressure. Delivering information in your own preferred style saves you preparation time, but it risks alienating the large portion of your audience operating in the other two modes. To avoid oversimplification, we have to establish a baseline rule. Nobody operates as just one sensory type 100% of the time. These are contextual preferences that shift based on your environment. They are not fixed psychological identities or rigid labels. Relying on your default mode is a communication habit that sacrifices broad comprehension for the sake of your own personal convenience. The visual preference, the C state, represents a massive portion of the population, largely due to the daily visual bombardment of modern life. You can identify visual processors by listening for specific predicates. They say things like, "That looks clear," "Show me," or "I need to get some perspective on this." As this diagram shows, you can physically spot visual processing by tracking eye movements. Their eyes will systematically move upward when they are constructing or remembering images. When speaking to a visual counterpart, translate your pitch into visual metaphors, slide decks, and diagrams. This strategy requires intense, active observation of their eye movements, demanding high eye contact, and significantly more prep time to create visual aids. Despite that high cognitive load, translating to a visual style allows these individuals to build rapport and make decisions with much less friction. Then there is the auditory preference, the hear state, where individuals prioritize tone, harmony, and sounding out ideas. You spot them through auditory predicates like, "That sounds good," "That resonates," or asking if a plan feels harmonious. The physical cue here is distinct. Their eyes will move laterally, glancing side to side toward their ears as they process what they've heard. The input strategy for this group is to prioritize verbal discussions over forcing them to read long, static documents. This requires you to actively listen to the rhythm and tone of their voice, meaning you cannot mentally draft your next reply while they are speaking. Accommodating an auditory processor often results in longer meetings, but it is a highly effective way to diffuse tension and reach a genuine agreement. The kinesthetic preference, the feel state, is where individuals process the world through physical sensations, emotions, and gut feelings. Listen for predicates focused on weight and texture, like solid foundation, get a grip, or feeling under pressure. Their physical cue involves moving their eyes downward and to the right when accessing feelings or touch. We have to be careful here. Looking down is frequently misread as sadness or evasion, when the person is actually just accessing a gut feeling. To reach them, shift your approach to tactile or emotional terms, offering physical walkthroughs or asking how they feel about an idea. Speaking in kinesthetic terms grounds abstract concepts in reality, building trust that is otherwise difficult to establish in remote, video call environments. These rich sensory languages are often abandoned in favor of digital processing, the non-sensory style that dominates modern corporate environments. This relies on neutral, logic-heavy words like analyze, implement, and repudiate, which strip away sensory connection. Using digital processing achieves technical precision and legal safety, but it often drains passion and engagement from the conversation. History's most compelling leaders avoided corporate jargon, instead building their speeches with visceral sensory imagery to move millions of people. Effective orators combine visual, auditory, and kinesthetic words to ensure their core message can connect with every listener in the room. If your goal is persuasion rather than mere compliance, you have to actively inject sensory predicates back into your vocabulary. Shifting to intentional translation requires observation across 3 roles: the manager, the educator, and the partner. For the professional manager, this means building a multi-sensory presentation, combining slides, Q&A, and interactive elements to reach every sensory type. This approach demands significantly more presentation design time, but it effectively eliminates boardroom apathy. For an educator or parent, this shift means moving past the traditional sit still and listen default. You have to relinquish rigid control over how a student studies, allowing them to build physical models or draw visual maps. Yielding control over the learning process directly results in improved retention and lower frustration. Finally, we apply this to the intimate partner who feels trapped in a cyclical argument loop. You can pause an active conflict to translate a grievance. For example, shifting from a visual "I don't see the issue" to a kinesthetic "How do you feel about this?" This requires a steep emotional trade-off. Acting as a translator means setting aside your own ego and emotional momentum in the heat of a fight. Matching their sensory language can lower the conversational temperature, giving both of you a shared linguistic platform to address the actual problem. Decoding eye movements and predicates isn't a mind-reading trick. It is a systematic framework for applied empathy. The true cost of mastering human connection is accepting that the burden of communication always rests on the transmitter, never the receiver.